to to the bond of joint cooperation and what contributes of the mutual interest. The visit's own negotiations.
خاصة قضية سد النهضة والأمن في البحر الأحمر والأوضاع على الحدود السودانية. هذه المراسم التي ستجرى في استقبال الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي في الخرطوم عاصمة السودان، وزيارة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي للسودان تأتي تجسيدا للإرادة القوية المتبادلة بين البلدين الشقيقين لتعزيز أطر التعاون بينهما في المجالات كافة وبما يسهم في تحقيق مصالحهما المشتركة. وتشهد زيارة التباحث حول أهم التطورات فيما يتعلق بالقضايا الإقليمية والقارية، خاصة قضية سد النهضة والأمن في البحر الأحمر والأوضاع على الحدود السودانية. إن العلاقات المصرية السودانية تضرب بجذورها في أعماق التاريخ.
There are strong and solid relationships and historic relationships between the two countries, and we are only one people joined on the river Nile, people that always all the mutual hopes are gathered, as well as the mutual concerns, people that combine the bonds of love and brothership. Sudan is always the strategic dips of Egypt as well as Egypt, respectively. There are relations that combine the brotherhood, mutual interests. Such relationships were enlisted through decades. Such brothership embodied in the historic stances between the two countries and peoples. Sudan was always the backup of Egypt in very decisive times in the history, as well as Egypt was a backup and a hinterland for Sudan in the history. The brotherly relationships between the two countries that were in depth in the history made us always that we stand before the incidents of history and geography. Egypt is enjoying the geniusity of place and time, as well as Sudan is enjoying the geniusity of the place and the time. Sudan is the African dips. And Sudan and Egypt for Sudan makes it to see the world through the Mediterranean Sea, through the trade roads that combine the two countries. And here we are, look at to such a great scene that is awaiting for the arrivals of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and the guards of honor were lined up to receive the arrival of His Excellency Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as well as playing up the two national anthems of the two countries to be reviewed by the President, that were lined up to salute him. Sudan, after the Great Revolution, is laying up new situations in the regions within its borders. Sudan people made their way to the history, voiced their will to be the owner and the sovereignty in their country, which is a thing that we all respect, that actually Egypt is bound in, that does not interfere in anybody, but always concede the mutual interest and preservation of geopolitical situations, such situations that to preserve the security of Egypt and Sudan strategically. There are several issues the region is going through. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's visit to Sudan, which is the first in a kind following the formation of the Transitional Southern Council, among the efforts of Egypt to support Sudan and its brotherly people within or during such a great moment. In addition to the keenness of mutual coordination, unification of visions, that the issues of mutual concern is taking place. It is expected through such a visit to hold a summit between Egypt and Sudan, as well as bilateral meetings with senior leaders and officials of Sudan to discuss different suspended issues of mutual cooperation, as well as the means of boosting the relations, in particular the fields of economics and politics. It is also deepened the mutual will between the two brotherly people and to support and enhance the mutual interest. It is also expected to review the discussions related to the regional and continental issues, in particular the good as well as security in the Red Sea and the development on the borders of the Sudan.
الآن معنا عبر الهاتف الدكتور أحمد عبد الدايم أستاذ كلية الدراسات الإفريقية. مرحبا بك دكتور.
In the form Dr. Abdel Daim, I would like to welcome you, sir.
كيف تقرأ أنت هذه الزيارة التي يقوم بها الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي والذي ينتظر وصوله إلى العاصمة الخرطوم بعد دقائق من الآن؟ في أي إطار من الأطر يمكن أن توصف هذه الزيارة؟
طبعا Certainly it is a very important strategic visit. It comes in a very decisive period witnessed by the relation, relationships not only between Egypt and Sudan, that is related to the Gulf issue and the Ethiopian and Sudanese issues, and we've already seen that Ethiopia that accusing Egypt randomly that provoking Sudan, despite that the historic status and geographic status is asserting the historical rights with regard to the borders, but coordinating the stances between the countries made such accusation goes in vain. Such accusations' aim is just to disagree or disjoin the two countries, but the history would say that the relationship is in a vital strategic between Egypt and Sudan, and we've seen that such a visit is also affirming such a matter, and that's said by the foreign minister of Sudan, Mariam al-Mahdi, as well as delegations of Sudanese, and all issues being reviewed, and we've seen the military coordination between the two countries, in particular that we are approaching the possibility of launching a war or a conflict between Sudan and Ethiopia with regard to the borders of Al-Shafaka. That's and the possibility that Ethiopia would enter in engagement of the Sudanese troops. Therefore, it is a great issue for Sudan, not to be for Egypt. And the Renaissance Ethiopian Dam is going to be in the center of the discussion that witnessed not only a strategic disagreement between the two countries, but was firstly around that Sudan never be affected by the GERD, but upon the first filling of the dam, we found that Sudan is the first one to be harmed by such a matter. We've already noticed this through the past 4 months. Therefore, it is required to offer a very decisive stance from Ethiopia, whether to execute an abiding agreement between the two countries, and hence it is up to the Sudanese and Egyptian leadership, while Sudan that declared frankly that the unilateral filling of reservoir would jeopardize the interest between the two countries. So it is required to coordinate between the two countries for maintaining the historical rights of the River Nile that adopted by the international norms and agreements in general. Doctor, in your view, how could you deepen the mutual interest between Egypt and Sudan? It is known that the international relationships daily around only interests. What combine us between the Sudan is the interest and the joint history. With respect to the interest, how could it be more deep in it to be available? Such committees are met monthly or rather weekly in the fields of security, military, socially, and issues are a lot. We've witnessed every 2 years a summit between the two leaders that affirms each 2 years there is a summit between the leadership of the two countries in order to evaluate the situations through ministerial committees that we've already mentioned. But I think that the dossier, whether in the field of electricity, agriculture, industry, or rather the security issues, all related to the stability of Sudan and the security of the Red Sea, in a way being held yearly and monthly to be followed up decisively, and we've already seen the coordination of the stance through the Egyptian intelligence officials every week. There are a strong and solid relationship, Dr. Ahmed Abdai, the Minister of the African Studies. I would like to thank you for having you through the phone.
Mr. Ambassador Hussein al-Hariri is joining us through the phone. Mr. Ambassador, would like to salute you. The future of the Egyptian and Sudanese relationship, how could you re-elaborate it within the current circumstances? It is a promising future based on the strong and historical relationship between the two countries. Can you please move way bit for the availability of the network? But the giant history is the river Nile that combined the two countries and the two peoples, and to compare the Sudanese-Egyptian relationships and Egypt's relationship with other countries. What distinguishes it is the great partnership that prominent the relationship between two peoples as well. In the framework of Sudanese and Egyptian relationships is based on firstly the River Nile between the two countries and the relationship between the people. And there are a great efforts to build on two elements to guarantee the future, stable future of the Sudanese-Egyptian relationships. There's a question, Mr. Ambassador, how could you describe such relationships that they are historic ones? How could we frame it an immunity before those who are interfering of such relationships that there are exist between all the relationship between the world countries? I would say that the joint interests that they are historic and strong and big, and the biggest guarantee to abort any attempts for any disagreements between the two countries, and we cannot exclude that such attempts from powers that are foreign of the region that are trying to exist or to make such sort of disagreements between the two countries, but the current circumstances would be an attempt for failing such a trap. And we've already seen this in the previously, the attempts of regional powers to put a foot on the borders, such as strategic and military existence on the southern borders of Egypt to threaten the Egyptian national security. But the Sudanese state, their wills of the new leaderships, that their destinies are joint, that is stronger than any relationship of any regional relationships, that they can overcome such a kind of interference. It's always that such interference would be potential and exist, but I think that based on the history of the two countries is the strongest guarantee of such relationships. And His Excellency's President Khartoum today that comes in such a strategic framework that came after talks being held in the field of military in Khartoum and headed by Major General, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of Egypt, as well as followed up by the visit of Her Excellency Mariam al-Mahdi, the Foreign Minister of Sudan, with her counterpart in Egypt, that affirms the realization and the awareness of the two political leaderships in Cairo and Khartoum to the importance of such relationships on the strategic level. There's also another question. There are several spots of conflict in the Horn of Africa. Will be able to form a great
hop in order to sort out such conflicts, as well as strengthening the African unit. With respect to the conflicts of the African continent, Egypt is cooperating with the AU, secondly, through its membership of the Security of the African Council and the bilateral relationships with the African countries in attempt to propose solutions of such conflicts. And if you can remember, as well as the European previews, that Mr. President is focusing always on the bond and the integration of the stability and security from one side, and the potentials of achieving sustainable development in the other hand. And the second point of the Aswan Forum of the Sustainable Peace and Security, hosted by Aswan during the last week that ended yesterday on Friday, I think that came in the framework of Egypt's keenness to affirming to the importance of proposing solutions of the conflicts, not also this, but exerting all the efforts of achieving stability following such conflicts. That Egypt is already affirming that it's very important to deal with the roots of such conflicts, to eradicate such conflicts would be the main keys and prerequisites to achieve the plan of the sustainable development, the 2030 agenda. Mr. Ambassador, if we talk about the Arab relationships, such very sensitive stances of Egypt and Khartoum, Cairo and Khartoum would contribute to improve such relationships between the Arab countries, as well as building a new Arab future. This would require several means, and I would like to thank you for raising such a point. It is the ambition of all the Arab people, but Egypt and Sudan as whole are agreed upon on the importance of the Arab solidarity and the importance of bolstering the joint Arab work. And I think that the Egyptian diplomacy from one side and from the Sudan from the other side, working on such within such a framework. I would like to go back on the 70s of the last century, when they proposed a project on the level of the Arab world to make Sudan on the food basket for the Arab countries. As you all know, there are hundreds of thousands of students that are a point of conflict, and the project that they land from the Sudan, which is the main element of the capital, and as well as the production and the capitalism from the Gulf countries, and the labor work, that Egypt has a surplus from Sudan, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab countries. So we are hoping that to revive such a project. As you all know, that the issue of food and wheat are one of the important and strategic issues on the international agenda. With respect to the prices of food, following the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that the Sudanese-Egyptian relationships are strong, promising, and I think that His Excellency, Mr. President's visit comes in such a framework. In addition, that the cooperation between Egypt and Khartoum in the GERD dossier that has a great strategic importance, not only for Egypt and Sudan, but also for the Nile Basin and the Horn of Africa. In your view, the importance of the joint talks between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Sudanese officials. I think that the bilateral relationships in the field of agreements and the joint projects being signed through decades, projects being agreed such as the electrical joint through the railways, and I think that the bilateral relationships would be on the top of the talks. In addition to the situation in the Horn of Africa, regionally, related to confronting terrorism and the Basin Nile countries, and of course the third issue is on top. I think that there are a joint vision between Egypt and Sudan that being crystallized through the latest talks between the two foreign ministers of Egypt and Sudan. Mr. Ambassador, the Sudanese-Egyptian relationships, as we always talk, that they are historic and deep in order to have such relationships away of any kind of disagreements. Would it be possible how would it be possible to immunize such relationships? Relationships of countries based on joint interest, mutual interest, and from now on then such agreements would face disagreements. And this is not the issue, but the issue is they're willing to discuss and overcome such disagreements. And I think that there exist between Cairo and Khartoum, and we found since the independence of Sudan till today, we've already seen that there are crucial phases between the two countries, but the insights of the two leaderships of Egypt and Sudan, we've found that we were successful between Egypt and Sudan to overcome such disagreements. And such disagreements isn't an issue from my diplomatic point of view, but the issue is basically, do we have the willingness and the ability to overcome such a disagreement in the framework of mutual interest? And I think that between Egypt and Sudan, the political will is there to manage such disagreements, firstly away of the media, because it's very important. Secondly, through the channels on the high level, political level. Mr. Ambassador Hussein al-Haridi, the Assistant of the Foreign Minister, I would like to thank you for being with us on the phone. And now we join on through the phone Mr. Akram al-Qassas, the journalist. And Mr. Akram, I would like to salute you. Given the view of the future of Sudanese and Egypt relationship, how would you elaborate on this point? I think the future is the present that would constitute the form of the future. And in fact, it is hard to talk about there are disagreements between Egypt and Sudan, or talking about the present and the future. They have joint fate through the history. Therefore, Egypt, through the last 7 to 8 years ago, since Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took the office, firstly, we're talking about the African nature of Egypt, its strategic and security circles among the Islamic and Arab circle, as well as the African circle and the Mediterranean, and of course the world circle, and based on geographic position of Egypt and Sudan, on the engagement of mutual interest on the Nile, for example, as well as the historic relationship. Therefore, the future, as you said, based on the being exerted by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in the Africa, because they are the Nile that join and link the two countries, and there are sustainable engagement between the two countries. Egypt is representing its launch within the African continent and regaining its relationship. It's a part of such a circle, and I think that Sudan doing the same. With Sudan also, the idea of the relationship is not an issue of because there is a joint coordination between the two countries, given the fact that the great history between the countries. And that represents the linkage electrically, and the effect of each other. In particular, they are in the sphere of strategy. They are neighbors as well as Libya. They are fully affected by any water or electrical project. They are also together on the countries of the Nile Basin that face different variables through the last decades and years that started to be directed strongly through development and overcome the economic crisis that was on top of the crisis previously. That should be based on more coordination in different arenas with respect to the unified policies with respect to the River Nile dams and others. In addition, that the idea of development to be sustainable, taking the advantage of the land and link between the countries. In fact, Foucault, the Egyptian businessman, should have a great role in such a matter. But allow me, Mr. Akram, that the media has always been accused that sometimes undeliberately to harm the relationship between the two countries. How would we reach rationalized between the two countries to be united and to put aside the point of disagreement that they are present through the countries of the world between each other? It's not only the media, there are other elements out of media, and of course they have the social media platforms. And let us say that there are some other countries do not wish to have this relationship to be continued, and to provocate some people on the social media to abuse such historic relationships, and it is not good for paying attention between Egypt and Sudan for such a thing. Let us to be clearly that Egypt and Sudan, there are two other countries do not wish to have them cooperated, such as the issues regarding Libya, for example. Therefore, these countries push always to set up disagreements between the two countries. And if you follow up such a file precisely, you would discover that there are many pretend that they work for the interests of Egypt and Sudan and launch and accuses in an attempt to put aside their interest and to be free for dealing with such attempts. It is very important with respect to the official media between the two countries. Not the official media actually do not do such attempts, and you've already said that the social media platforms is enough to spoil such a relationship. The responsible media in general, whether they are official or not official, politicians, for example, in both countries, they both know the interests of the two countries do not wish to let this to happen. But let's say these such attempts they are there in the history, and as we all know, there are extremes. Groups was in Egypt, and Egypt had successfully overcome in the 30th of June, as well as in Sudan, that we found that they are working in foreign entities that trying to take the advantage of such a thing. Let's say that such a current that hates the good between the two countries, and of course such a current is a way of all the political calculations. So I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Akram Al-Qassas. And now back to the capital of Sudan, Khartoum. Ashraf Abdelaziz is joining us, the editor-in-chief of Al Garida newspaper. Mr. Ashraf, good morning. How would Sudan look to the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's visit to Khartoum, and how do you say the important files that can be discussed? I think it is very important to have such a visit. They are historical, and it is the one bond. Such a visit comes in the atmospheres that are in the skies of the horizons of such a relationship, and I think that the GERD issue would be discussed to propose solutions between the quadripartite. Excuse me, and from one side, from other side, that such a visit came after the signing of military protocols between the two countries, and I think it is such a visit comes in a very appropriate time that both countries would take an advantage in the framework of the mutual interest. In your view, Sudan, such a very beloved countries, what are the hopes that we wish of these peoples in the framework of the relationship between the two countries? And certainly there are solid relationships even in the times of the hardship and the tension. Such relations have never stopped in the framework between the past governments that witnessed a moment of tension between of such a relationship that never been cut before. And as you said, within such an atmosphere, it is possible for having a good optimization. Egypt can contribute in such. And they had several meetings between the Egyptian and Sudanese officials, as well as exchanging gifts between Egypt and providing Egyptian troops in Sudan in assistance of their military issues. And there are also more files that govern the interest, and there are such disagreements that can be solved with respect to the exchange in the goods between the two countries that can affect at a larger scale to have such relations to be more stronger as we all wish. Mr. Ashraf, in your view, how would we not to miss the chance for those who are trying to attempt of creating disagreements between the two countries? How could we stop such currents? The two peoples are fully aware of such attempts based on the historical relationship between the two peoples. In addition to would actually expressing their views in a satire way that they cannot eradicate any attempt of spoiling the relationship between the two peoples, in particular in the framework of the international stances. It is naturally there are other points of view, but would not affect the roots of such relationships in the history. Mr. Ashraf, it is well known that such international relationships are based on interests. In your view, what are interests that Sudan would like to be supported by Egypt in such a framework? And of course, there are benefits that can be gained through the good relationship between Egypt and Sudan. That we've witnessed this previously with respect to the style of living between the two peoples, as well as there are agricultural experiences. We've already been a very good solution in the economy in order to have a good prospect of the progress in the economy. In the previous era of President Ghaffar al-Muniri, there were relationships that integrated in the history. How could we revive such a kind of relationship during our times? Mostly there were main relationships, therefore there were only just events and occasions that could be represented in a larger scale that became very much different from the past, that witness or could be an example or representation of benefits through the field of investment. And of course, Egypt had a very solid experience strategically in let the Sudan to be benefit in such a field. As a journalist and a media personnel, what are your notes on these media status in the two countries with respect to the bilateral relationships away of the social media platforms? The Sudanese journalism playing a great role assigned and by the state, yet there are views that came with the coordination could be criticized but do not affect or abuse to the form of such a relationship. It is the reality in Sudan with respect to the Sudanese-Egyptian relationship. Mr. Ashraf Abdelaziz, the editor-in-chief of Al Garida, I would like to thank you for having you with us. We're still following such scenes, awaiting the arrival of His Excellency Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to be received officially in Khartoum. The Guard of Honors are lined up and playing the national anthem of the two countries, as we used to see. It is a great scene between Egypt, or a great scene of Sudan that we both joined into the River Nile is always extending a great solution to the Sudanese people. Government and leaders have always wished them to all the best, and as always to wish to have a very strong relationship as we have a very prosperous, unified destiny and future. Dr. Samir, the
the chief of the Arab constitution of the Arab Parliament, I would like to salute you. I would like to welcome to have me. From the perspective, from your strategic perspective, how could you see the relationship between Egypt and Sudan away of the regional atmosphere? Such a relationship were indeed in the history that proved that Egypt and Sudan were strong and are stronger when they are approaching with each other, and of course the vice versa. And we've already suffered a lot to be, instead of have only one Sudan, to have two Sudans. In a time that Egypt was always extend their hand to Sudan. All the relations would witness moments of disagreement and prosperity from the other side, and we are facing a new phase that could witness a prosperity between the two countries, because they are the basis of the relationships, were the basis of the relationship between the two peoples. And now we have a president that is believed that the national security of Egypt and Sudan is part and parcel. And since he taken office, even the evidence were in previously that actually to reactivate a new relationship, whether it the economic level, the military level, or the constant military support. And today we are launching a new phase of relationships between the two great and big countries that were only one country in the past. We are going to activate the linkage of the railways. We're increasing the electrical linkage to reach the north of Sudan, to be in the great part of Sudan to gain their requirements of electricity from Egypt. Egypt in its way to pave the way to be for the Egyptian and contracting companies of their history in the economic reform. What Egypt has of infrastructures, of course, the armed forces and the national security and the Six Ways Committee. In fact, that witnessed the signing that would be a completing for such an agreement, according to what is the Sudanese side wish and see. We are talking about Egypt and Sudan. Mostly 40% of the Arab people, that is about the half of the people in the Arab in the river, the Nile Valley, in the eastern or the African eastern of the area. President Abdel Fattah Sisi met the high-level officials in Cairo, on top of which Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. It is the first visit following the revolution of Sudan, and but 7 visits made by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and it was the first destination for his first and second elections. Sudan were in the third country being visited by the president, followed by Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and China and Ethiopia 3 times, and we are looking forward to be a new opening of relationship and activating of the 4 freedoms agreement that the Sudanese side to receive a message from the whole of Egyptian people, more than 100 million. So we are brothers for Sudan to be more than happy to have integration between the two countries, to be on the unprecedented level after the liberties of two countries. And of course the visit holds more than hopes, more challenges. Mentioning the challenges, how could the Sudanese-Egyptian relationships would be survive of such attempts to be on a hotspot for an end? And I'd like to salute your question that the relationships would face obstacles, resistance from hence and there, from here and there, but the political will, popular support where of the two countries would enable them to overcome the regional challenges, whether they are aside or together. For example, the two countries exist on the longest borders that are longest to Libya, and of course they are joint borders with Libya, and also parts of the Al Sahel and the Sahara countries that witness some movements of the extremists, as well as the challenge of the river Nile and the GERD faced by the two countries. And the Sudanese side realized that the dangers on Sudan of the non-coordinations with managing or administrating the dam or the filling of reservoir. They are, or they became together, the 2+1, Egypt and Sudan, in one front before Ethiopia. And the civil component and the military component in the face of the traditional face are lined up with the necessity of supporting Egypt's stance. On the other hand, Egypt supported Sudanese side that requested supervision that controlled the African Union and other parts. I would like to excuse you, Mr. Qassas, that the President Abdel Fattah Sisi has already arrived in Sudan, all waiting for the arrival of the President Abdel Fattah Sisi, guard of honor lined up to salute the President and military high officials. Here he is, President Abdel Fattah Sisi, shaking hand, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the President of the Seven Council of Sudan. Simply, we are waiting to watch the official proceedings with the reception.
طابور الشرف جاهز للتفتيش. السيد رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية. جنبا هو. طابور الشرف اسمع.
تابعنا مع حضراتكم وصول الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي إلى العاصمة السودانية رسمية، ومن المقرر أن يتبعها مباحثات قمة فضلا عن عدد من اللقاءات الثنائية مع كبار القادة والمسؤولين السودانيين. وها هما الرئيسان يقفان لالتقاط الصور التذكارية. وبعد هذه الصور التذكارية ستبدأ المباحثات الرسمية بين الرئيسين، والتي بكل تأكيد ستتمتع هذه المباحثات بخصوصية تنبع من خصوصية العلاقات المصرية السودانية، والتي هي علاقات استراتيجية بكل المقاييس والمعايير. في
فزيارة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي للسودان تأتي تجسيدا للإرادة القوية المتبادلة بين البلدين الشقيقين لتعزيز أطر التعاون بينهما في المجالات كافة وبما يسهم في تحقيق مصالحهما المشتركة. وتشهد الزيارة التباحث حول أهم التطورات فيما يتعلق بالقضايا الإقليمية والقارية خاصة قضية سد النهضة والأمن في البحر الأحمر والأوضاع على الحدود السودانية.
The security in the Red Sea and the security in the Sudanese borders.
هذا منظر بانورامي للقصر الذي ستجرى فيه المباحثات بين الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي وفريق الركن عبد الفتاح البرهان رئيس مجلس السيادة السوداني. وهذا أيضا منظر بانورامي للعاصمة السودانية المثلثة الخرطوم، هذه العاصمة العربية الساحرة والتي لها كل المكانة في قلوبنا وكل المعزة والمحبة والاحترام.
Plays a great impact on the heart of and respect on the hearts of the Egyptians. We've had a live coverage of the arrival of the President Al Fatah Sisi to the triumphal capital of Al Khartoum, and we would continue to follow up through the news coverage that would deal with the talks of Sudan and Egypt, and long live Egypt and Sudan. We would also follow the successive developments of the talks upon it takes time.